This idea of God willing all of existence at every moment is a profound, profound idea. And it really forces us to realize that we can no longer call God a creator. Creator would mean once upon a time God decided to create a world. Judaism says that a much more accurate way of describing God than creator is to call God a sustainer. In Hebrew, we would say that God is a borei, he's a creator, but the more accurate word is that he is a mikayem. Mikayem means to sustain. That just like the green balloon in your mind is being sustained by your will, all of existence at every moment is being sustained by God's will. And the more we think about it, the more I think it really leads to an entirely different question. If everything at every moment is God continuously breathing life and existence into everything around us, it really begs the question of why. Why in the world would an infinite being bother to continuously, every moment, create and recreate every molecule and every bug and every leaf and every cloud in the entire universe? What's the purpose of it? It sounds kind of pointless. We would have to agree it's not a difficult thing for God to do. It doesn't take energy. If I was to do it, it would take a lot of work. It would take a lot of effort. But for God to do it, it clearly takes no effort. It doesn't really answer the question, though. Why would God bother doing it? And this really is, I think, where we go from looking at the idea of God as a philosophical construct to looking at God as central to the whole question of existence. Not his existence, but our existence. The real question that a human being is after when they're trying to discover the idea of God and the nature of God is not a philosophical exercise of what created our universe. That's what a scientist does. When normal human beings are pursuing the question of God's existence, in essence, they're asking themselves the question, why am I here? Did somebody put me here? Is there a purpose to my life? Is this part of a grand plan? Is there some being that expects me to live life in a certain way? And we can now begin to answer that question by realizing that if there's an infinite being that's continuously creating everything at every moment, he gave me my eyes and my brain and my arms and my eyes and my ears and my heart, and he's keeping me breathing every second, and he's keeping everything around me continuously functioning every second, I can now begin to explore the very relevant life-dependent question of why am I here? And here again, Judaism presents it in the form of a bit of a paradox. If we were to ask ourselves the question, let's try and imagine before there was a creation. All there was infinite. All there was this unimaginable infinite force called God. God is the label that we'll use. At that point, all there was infinite. No time, no space. This God has no limitations. This God has no needs. This God isn't lacking anything. The question becomes, what really makes more sense? Would we assume that a God like that is going to go ahead and create a world? Or does it make more sense to presume that an infinite, unlimited being that has no needs, has no lacking, that has no limitations, is not going to create? What seems more logical? What seems more in line with the nature of infinite? That infinite will create, or that infinite won't create? Judaism says it's really much more logical to say that God won't create. Why bother? It's not going to do God any good. God can't benefit from it. God can't gain by it. It can't add anything onto God's existence. If God is infinite and unlimited and has no needs, creation can't do anything for God. If all of creation anyway, if all of existence is just a figment of God's imagination, that figment of God's imagination doesn't entertain him, because God doesn't get bored, and God doesn't have curiosity, and God can't on any level have any kind of needs. So we come to a stunning conclusion. It makes more sense to say that God wouldn't create than to say that God would. And yet we look around, and it seems that we are here. God did create us. What's the point? So Judaism gives here a fascinating answer. Judaism says, essentially, that if it's impossible to conceive of a God who created the world for God's own benefit, that there's only one other possible answer. That God must have created the world purely for the benefit of the creation itself. that instead of looking at creation as an act of God fulfilling himself, or God satisfying a desire that he had, because he has no desires and has no needs, we say rather that the whole entire understanding of creation is that it's a gift. It's a gift where the only beneficiary is not God himself, but the things that God created. And this is essentially what we say in the book of Psalms. King David in the book of Psalms says, Olam chesed yibaneh. God created the world as an act of total loving kindness. It's the ultimate example of a gift purely for the sake of the receiver and not at all for the sake of the giver. It's a difficult idea for us to understand, mainly because when we look at that question in our own terms, why do we create things? Why do we have children? Why do we paint paintings? Why do we go to movies? Why do we go on diets? Why do we go off diets? Why do we do what we do? We realize that really every human pursuit that we have, on some level, is a pursuit of self-fulfillment. The person goes on the diet because they'll feel happier losing weight. A person goes off the diet because they're more comfortable and it's easier not to lose the weight. A person has children and feels better about having a continuation of themselves. A person wins a medal in the Olympics and feels like they've accomplished something tremendous in life. Every achievement that we have, even when we give gifts to people, even when we help people, even when we're being altruistic, on some level, really fulfills us in a very deep way. As a matter of fact, the human being who spends his time giving and being altruistic and caring about others deeply fulfills himself much more than the person who goes around just taking things from people. So we're stuck in a bit of a box, since every pursuit that we have in our human experience is our own pursuit of ourselves. It's a pursuit of our own fulfillment. It's a little difficult for us to really put ourselves in God's shoes and imagine the idea that creation is all there as an act of total giving. In other words, since we would say there's no human example of a creation, of an act, of a pursuit that's totally for the sake of the receiver, where the giver gets nothing out of it, there's no human example of it, it's hard for us to really relate to the idea of God creating in a way where it's totally there just for us and not there for him.